to the Wildline podcast. I'm your host, Dan. This is a podcast about movies and how much money they make at the box office. Today's show is going to be a weekend projection show. We're going to talk about this upcoming weekend of January 27th, 2017. God, it feels weird to say 2017 now. It doesn't feel like it's possible. As someone in their mid-30s, time, I'm not that old, but time seems to be moving quite quicker as I get older. Any event, let's get to the good stuff instead of my philosophical rants about time. So we got three big movies opening this weekend. We got A Dog's Purpose, which is sort of a live animal comedy drama with a lot of controversy surrounding it. We have Resident Evil: The Final Chapter. I suppose it's the final Resident Evil movie. I hope so. What a terrible film series. And then last but not least, we have Gold, which was a movie that was supposed to come out in Christmas, but for whatever reason, they're dumping it here at the end of January. They obviously have zero confidence in it whatsoever. In the event, so what we're going to do is we'll walk through each film, talk about what the industry people are saying about it, and then run some comparable movie numbers, and then give ourselves a little guess on what we think it's going to do. I guess, I don't know, it's not really our numbers. I'm talking like it's the royal we over here. It's just me. In any event, let's get started. So A Dog's Purpose is opening on 3,058 screens. I saw the trailers for this probably 3 to 4 months ago. I knew right away it was going to be something big just because of the way that they were marketing the film. It seemed like they were doing a great job with it. The trailer was fantastic. Dennis Quaid seemed to be like really comfortable in that role, at least on the scenes in the trailer. It felt like everything was sort of fitting together really well with the film. Now, unfortunately, a couple of weeks ago, some smartphone video was released of the shooting of the film where it looked like a dog might have been abused or put in a situation that would have been harmful to the dog. So people, of course, nowadays are obsessed with animals. Who cares about human rights when you have animal rights? I'm not going to get into it. In any event, people lost their minds as they're wont to do with animals. And basically, PETA's against the film. They're going to picket the film. The premiere was called off. There's been huge back and forths on TMZ and in the press in general. It's just been, honestly, a total shit show. But you know what they say, indie press is good press. I don't know who said that. Was it P.T. Barnum? Probably. It sounds like something he would have said. He also said, if you want to get a crowd, start a fight. Or maybe that was Ray Cohen. I think it was P.T. Barnum. In any event, they kept on quoting that with Donald Trump running for president because apparently he looks up to that concept. Let's avoid the politics here and talk about some numbers. Dog's Purpose is being projected by Variety to make $18 to $22 million this weekend. That would put about a 6,500 per theater average. That sounds decent. Without the controversy, I think we would have been talking 2025. But not anymore. I think it's just there's too much bad blood with this film. And a lot of people are going to stay away, I think. Box Office Pro is saying 17.5 million, and Box Office Mojo is saying basically $18 million. So they're all pretty much in the high teens. Only Variety is suggesting that low 20s are possible. If we look at some comparable films over the past few years, I think Max came out last year, maybe this year. I don't remember when it came out. I think it must have been last year. It did an opening weekend of $12.2 million. Its per theater average was $4,200 per theater. If A Dog's Purpose does a similar PTA there, you're talking $12.8 million for A Dog's Purpose. That feels, it's obviously a lot lower than what the projections, the industry projections are saying. But because of the bad press, I don't really know how this is going to play. So let's just keep that one in mind, 12.8 million. Dolphin's Tale 2 did $15.8 million on its opening weekend. Its PTA was $4,300. If A Dog's Purpose copies that, it'll do about 13.1 million. Again, lower than the other projections. And then Hotel Dogs, which I don't remember, came out a while ago. I was looking for a dog film that seems like it would have been comparable to this. It did $17 million its opening weekend. Its PTA was $5,200. If A Dog's Purpose does that, you're looking at just about $16 million for the weekend. So all three of those were lower than A Dog's Purpose. Kind of makes sense. They didn't seem like they had the big names in those films. They just didn't seem like they were as polished as A Dog's Purpose. I can't emphasize enough how well done the trailer was for this film. It looks like a really heartwarming, good family film with no really crude humor. It seems like it just has a really good message to it. If I had a family, I'd probably take it to see it, even after all this PETA stuff. In any event, I wanted to film that, to give us like maybe the ceiling of what maybe it could have done. So Marley and Me is a really good comparable here. That did $36 million. Its per theater average was $10,400. If A Dog's Purpose copies that, you're looking at about $31.8 million. Probably not going to happen. With the bad publicity and, I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes now, it's 33% on Rotten Tomatoes. It has a fairly decent wanna see score, 88% on, about 10,000 users on Rotten Tomatoes. So it's like, there's some buzz here. And I think that mostly comes from the really polished marketing. But that PETA, scandal, I think is really going to hurt it here. I definitely felt like gut wise, if you just asked me like a month ago, it's like, oh yeah, probably like low 20s. I'm not thinking so now. I think the thing about the press though, is that sure, some people are going to stay away because of the idea that this film abused the dog or one of the dogs involved. Is definitely gonna like scare people off, but at the same time, because it's been in the press so much, the awareness of the film is shot dramatically higher than it would have been without this press. So more people are aware of the film, which means more people might even think about going to the film. I don't know if it's not going to offset the bad press, but I think it will help it keep it from totally flopping. I think on the low end, you're looking at about a 5,000 per theater average. That would put it at $15.3 million. I think that's the basement here. Mid, you're thinking like 6,000 per theater, which would put it at 18 million. I think on the high end, if for whatever reason the bad press really doesn't touch it, and this is sort of the idealistic, if there was no bad press, I was going to say about 8,000 per theater, which put it at just about $24.5 million. I don't think that's going to happen, but I do get the feeling that we live in a really weird time now where any press seems to be good press. It's like the whole postmodern concept that was big in the 80s and 90s has really come to fruition, where if you just talk about something, even if it's negative, for some reason that increases its cachet in culture. Look no further than Donald Trump. President Trump, I'm sorry. So I'm thinking it's going to go a little bit higher than the mid and the low. I'm going to say $6,500 per theater, and that will put it at $19.9 million. So just a shade under 20 million. It's too bad. I really think that this film could have performed a lot better. But there's just something about a dog being mistreated that makes Americans go insane. So I think a large chunk of people are going to stay home from this, and so it probably will not hit the 20 million. The quality of the film does not look high, so I don't think it was going to stick around for a long time, but they could have made a good chunk of change here in the first couple of weekends. So Dog's Purpose, I'm saying just about 19.9 million on the dot, to be precise. So the next big opener we have is Resident Evil, the final chapter. Now this one got some buzz for a couple reasons. I'm trying to remember off the top of my head, but I do believe that the stunt woman involved in this was horrifically injured. Like her face kind of came off of her skull or something. Really gross stuff. She's very lucky to be alive, but she is alive. So there was controversy surrounding this film. I feel like maybe someone else died on the film. I don't know. I'll have to look that up. But if you're interested, look it up. So there's a lot of problems with the filming of this. I don't know why they keep making these films. I mean, I probably saw the first one when it came out back in 2002. This reminds me a lot of the Underworld series. It's just like, why did you make the first one? I get why you made the first one, perhaps because Resident Evil is one of the greatest video games of all time. In fact, one of the scariest moments I ever had in my life was when I was younger, whenever PlayStation came out, whenever that was, like early 90s, mid 90s, and playing Resident Evil for the first time. There's a moment when you're walking through this deserted, dark, seemingly haunted mansion, and everything's super quiet, and you're walking through a hallway, and then out of nowhere, this mutant rabid dog jumps to the window, and I swear to God, I almost died. I was like probably 10, and I almost had a heart attack. But I think everybody has a soft spot in their heart for the Resident Evil video games, just because they've been around for so long. It helped sort of, I guess it's zombie related. So it kind of helped bring on that craze that happened in the last decade and continues through now with like Walking Dead and stuff like that. So it was a part of that world. But this film series has been going on forever. I'll just do a quick rundown of how they ended up. The original Resident Evil opened in March of 2002. It did $17 million in its opening, pretty good. Ended up with $40 million, not that great at the end of the day. Resident Evil Apocalypse came out in 2004 in September that year. Opened at $23 million, which is a good opening. Ended up at $51 million overall. Okay, a little bit better. Resident Evil Extinction opened up at $23 million as well, and also ended up just about at $51 million. So they're nothing if not a consistent series of films. Resident Evil Afterlife came out in 2010, also September. They're really big on the September releases for this series. I guess it's trying to like cash in on Halloween. I guess if you open it up and these opened up like early mid-September, you're thinking that you could just keep it in there until the end of October and get that Halloween audience. Resident Evil Afterlife opened at almost $27 million, the biggest opening in the series, ended up at 60. And then back to Earth we go with Resident Evil Retribution, which opened, basically 4 years ago in 2012. Opened at $21 million, closed out at $42 million. So the highest of the series was Afterlife. Biggest opening, biggest total domestic take. It's been over 4 years since the last film. This is beginning to feel a lot like Underworld Blood Wars, which came out earlier this year and did not perform that well. So let's do some industry sort of rundown here and what they're thinking. Variety is saying $13 to $14 million for Resident Evil, and Box Office Pro saying $15.5 million. These seem pretty on the money here. Box Office Mojo saying specifically $12.2 million. So that's pretty right on the money there. So you're basically looking at about a 4 to 5K per theater average, which I think is fair. Looking at some comparables, but do keep in mind that most of the series opened in the low $20 million for its opening weekend, and ended at about 50-ish for the most part. So the industry is basically saying this is not going to do that well. It's probably going to have the lowest opening of the series. We've looked at some comparable films that are a little bit more recent. Obviously, we just talked about Underworld Blood Wars that opened at $13.7. Per theater average was $4,500. If Resident Evil The Last Chapter does that, you're looking at basically $14 million. So right in line with what the industry is saying. Last Witch Hunter feels like a comparable film, maybe on the low end. Opened at $10.8 million with a $3,500 per theater average. If Resident Evil does that, you're looking at exactly the same, $10.8 million, opening on the same number of screens. And then obviously Resident Evil Retribution opened at $21 million. With a nice high 7,000 per theater average there. If this last Resident Evil movie is able to do that, you're looking at just about the same, about $21.7 million for the weekend. Those, I don't know. I just don't see it doing 20 million. I don't see it at all. I think the sequel is way too late. I think the sequel has a lot of baggage. The marketing for it has been pretty piss poor. I feel like we're going to have an Underworld-esque type opening, maybe a little bit higher. So I'm saying on the low end, you're looking at a $3,500 per theater average. That would put it at $10.8 million. So right in line with the last Witch Hunter, which was the Vin Diesel film that did not do well. And then you're looking at maybe the mid-range for Resident Evil here, the final chapter, maybe $4,000 per theater. And that would put it at $12.4 million for the opening weekend. That feels okay. On the high end, I'm going to say $6,000 per theater. Or maybe if you can say the high end would be Retribution, which was $7,000 per theater, which would put it at basically $22 million. I do not think that is going to happen. The reviews were never great for these films. And this one has a 40% in Rotten Tomato. Not a huge number of reviews yet, only 10 reviews. What's interesting though, and this is I'm just finding this out for the first time, so you get to sort of get my real-time reaction here. I'm looking at Rotten Tomatoes, and I am seeing the want to see score, which is just a way of Rotten Tomatoes of measuring customer interest or viewer interest, whatever you want to call it, on a film that has not come out yet, and it is sitting at 52,000 ratings. That is really, really high. And you have a 95% want to see score, which basically means of the people that they've asked, a lot of people want to see this. This is way higher than A Dog's Purpose. I mean, The Dog's Purpose had 10,000 ratings. This has 5x that. I don't know. I don't know what to do now. I feel like I'm going to be wrong here, but I just got to go with my numbers and go with like my analysis. I'm going to say it's going to do 5,000 per screen, and end up with $15.5 million for the weekend. Resident Evil, the final chapter. Now I could be totally wrong. I'm looking at that score now and I'm like, wow, like that's a lot of ratings. But I'm going to stick with the number. So I'm going to say 15.5 million for Resident Evil. And then last but not least, you know what? Absolutely least. This movie Gold, I saw the trailer probably 4 months ago. It was supposed to come out at Christmas. It was supposed to be an awards prestige film. It's got Matthew McConaughey, who, had his renaissance, the reconnaissance, whatever you can call it, a few years ago with Dallas Buyers Club, which was a good film. I wouldn't say it's a great film. His performance was phenomenal, I'll tell you that much. And then, of course, his role in True Detective, which is essentially already considered classic. I mean, he becomes that character in such a way that the performance was mind-boggling and awe-inspiring. The only other performance that I can think of that is close to that is Bryan Cranston in Breaking Bad. So Matthew McConaughey is definitely on the up and up. He had some tough films this year or last year, like Free State of Jones, which didn't do very well. And he has not really hit a home run here in his film career since True Detective or Dallas Buyers Club. This looks to be a big whiff to add to the collection here. So Gold is opening on 2,166 screens, pretty wide for what I would consider to be kind of an art house film. Variety is saying $45 million for the weekend. Box Office Pro is saying $3.75 million. Box Office Mojo is saying $4.1 million. Those all seem very fair to me. They're basically saying a per theater average of $1,700 to about $2,100 per theater. That doesn't seem outrageous to me. It seems pretty on the money. Now, if we do look at some comparable films here to Gold, now Gold, to give you sort of like a little bit of synopsis, it just seems like it's about a dude. It kind of reminds me of maybe like Wolf of Wall Street a bit. It had that vibe to it. Speaking of great Matthew McConaughey performances, it's about a guy who ends up running a gold company. He seems kind of like a sleazy dude and wants to get in something where he can be super rich, and he ends up buying gold at like a gold mine. I don't know. It's got who else is in this thing? Bryce Dallas Howard, who I love. I don't know why I love her, but I think she's great. Great in The Village. Great in was she good in Jurassic World? I think the consensus is that she was not great in Jurassic World. Corey Stoll's in this, great. But this movie's going to get buried. No one has any idea this movie exists. A horrific marketing campaign by the Weinstein Company. Just awful. One of the worst I've ever seen, actually. I don't know why they're releasing this thing wide. It makes no sense. Just shift this thing off to VOD and it'd be done with it. So some comparable films here. Free State of Jones opened at $7.5 million last year. Its per theater average was just about $2,700. If Gold does that, you're looking at $5.8 million for the weekend, a little higher than what the industry is saying. Another film that came to mind was No Escape. This probably had a better marketing campaign, but feels kind of a similar sort of, I don't know, it just feels comparable. I don't know why, maybe because they're in a foreign land. I'm stupid sometimes. In any event, that opened at $8.1 million. Its per theater average was $2,400. If Gold does that, you're looking at $5.2 million. So it does kind of seem kind of in line. I don't know why I think it's a comparable, but in my bones, I feel it. What really stuck out to me as a comparable is the movie Burnt. That was a Bradley Cooper film about him being sort of a badass chef, which you know what? I don't understand the badass chef concept. Like, Anthony Bourdain's cool, whatever. He's got tattoos and he used to be a drug addict, but he's also a really good cook. And then there's just something I'm gonna go on a rant. I'm gonna go on a rant. Patton Oswalt does this whole routine about how chefs are like rock stars, and like how they're like these crazy manic depressive like drug addicts, and like, but they do like amazing. What does a chef do at the end of the day besides make food? I love food. Don't get me wrong. If you saw me, you'd be like, yeah, this guy loves food. But at the end of the day, what are they doing besides making food? Like, there's all of these TV shows about chefs. There's all this whole channels about chefs, and it's like this really cool, edgy, foodie thing to get into. And I was like, this is fucking stupid. This is dumb. That's my little chef rant. I have nothing against chefs. I just don't get why they became so cool over the last like 15 years, like these rebel chefs. In any event, Burnt was a movie about that, and apparently everybody else was over it because it opened at $5 million. Its per theater average was $1,700. If Gold does that, you're looking at $3.6 million. I'm calling a huge bomb here. On the low end, so you're looking at $1,000 per theater, or we're looking at Rock the Kashba area. $2.2 million would be the opening weekend if it does that, sort of slams into the ground. Mid would be $2,000 per theater. You're looking at $4.3 million. On the high end, I'm saying $3,000 per theater. You're looking at $6.4 million. I don't think that's even remotely possible here. I'm calling for a huge, huge bomb. I don't think it's going to break the $1,000 barrier, which is like the ultimate flop zone. But I think it's going to do about $1.5 thousand per theater. End up at $3.2 million for the weekend. So, kind of a big flop for him, but like, what do they expect? Like, no one knows what this movie is, and you're pushing it out wide. I don't know. I just feel like cut your losses and just put it on Netflix, like premiere it on Netflix, like right now. And people are like, oh, what's this? Matthew McConaughey? This seems cool. And people will eat it up. Like, it just seems like a failed strategy for them. They're going to waste money putting it out. In any event, just to do a little quick recap here. A Dog's Purpose, I'm predicting $6,500 for its per theater average, which would put it at $19.9 million for the weekend. I just don't think it's going to hit 20 because of the PETA stuff. Resident Evil, the last chapter, hopefully. I'm saying $5,000 per theater. That means it'll hit $15.5 million for the opening weekend. And last and least, Gold, I'm predicting $1,500 per theater and $3.2 million. Not the most exciting weekends. All three of these films look like they're not good. Not that we're going to talk about art criticism on the show, but from a business perspective, I think they're all of them are kind of middling. From a quality perspective, they all look very poor. So it's not the most exciting weekend. We'll see how we do. I'm more excited to see a couple of things. What I'm looking for this weekend is definitely how Split does in terms of its drop. It had a great $40 million weekend last weekend, and I'm expecting it to drop over 50. Maybe 50. I don't know, because there's a great twist at the end, and I'm not going to give it away, obviously, but people have been really stoked about this film, and I've heard a lot of people talking about it. I'm going to say it's going to drop right at 50. I think it's going to do about $20 million. I think it edges out A Dog's Purpose, which is crazy to say, but I think it's going to happen. So I'm going to watch that one. I kind of want to see how Hidden Figures does this weekend. It's just like, that's the story of the winter, is Hidden Figures sort of coming out of nowhere. It wasn't coming out of nowhere. They bombarded us with those trailers and little featurettes all over the place. But it is done surprisingly well. And I think that the thing that I'm most interested in seeing, and this is a story in a film I've been following on this show for the last 4 months almost, is La La Land. I always bring it up when I can. It tied the record for most nominations. I think it had 14 Academy Award nominations, which were released this week, I believe on Tuesday. So I was like, it's only on 1,800 screens last weekend. Like, if it gets Best Picture, like, they got to push it out to more. And it sounds like they are. They're going to expand it to over 3,000 screens this weekend. So it is going to rake in the money. I'm trying to figure out off the top of my head what I think it's going to do. It still has a great per theater average of about 4,500. If it does that on, let's say 3,200 screens, you're looking at $14.4 million. I think it's going to definitely break that $10 million barrier. I'm hoping it does a lot, just because I'm excited about the film. I actually didn't like it, surprisingly. I'm excited about it just for a business perspective and just analysis wise, because I'm a huge nerd. But I saw it on Christmas Day, I believe, Christmas Eve, whatever. And I was not a huge fan of it. I think the ending is quite poor and the writing didn't really make sense towards the end. But I do believe that America is going to fall in love with this film, and it's going to be considered a classic here sooner rather than later. In any event, that's my rundown for the projections this weekend. I will be back next week, maybe Sunday or Monday, with a review of the weekend, and we'll see how we did. Thanks for listening, guys. This has been the Wildline Podcast.